friends, and welcome to the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. I'm Ashley Cipoletti, your host, and I'm on a mission to create more connection. Dogs are really just the starting point. Together, we'll explore how to live with more harmony, ease, and healing so we can show up more as the best version of ourselves, not just for our dogs, but also for our community and our planet too. So grab a coffee and let's dive in. Hello, friends. We are going to talk today about boundaries and why they are so important to not only feeling not drained yourself, because I think when we allow others to break our boundaries, we feel exhausted and almost like we're losing ourselves because we're not holding true to that. So boundaries in our personal life can be anything as far as I'm not going to, kiss someone on the first date. Breaking a boundary if you do, right? Anytime we break boundaries, it can feel not so great. And every time we allow others to break our boundaries, if they are aware of it, you're kind of creating a environment in the relationship for boundaries to be pushed and broken. So many people know what the word boundaries means, or you might envision even boundaries of a property line. Boundaries like a wall. But boundaries aren't always these rigid lines that are drawn in the grass for all to see, right? It's boundaries can also be as a way to seen as a way to take care of ourselves. So if you understand how you can set and maintain healthy boundaries, it'll really help you avoid the feelings of resentment, disappointment, frustration, and anger that can come up when our limits or our boundaries have been pushed or crossed. And boundaries can take many forms. They can range from being really rigid and strict to almost non-existent. If you have more rigid boundaries, you might be keeping others at a distance. You might seem detached. You might have few close relationships or avoid close relationships. And if you have more loose or open boundaries, you might get too involved with others' problems, find it difficult to say no to anyone, overshare personal information, that's me, or seek to please others for fear of rejection. So you might be just saying yes to things that someone else needs that you really don't want to do or are draining to you. Now, a person with healthy boundaries understands that making their expectations clear will help establish what behavior you'll accept from other people and or dogs, and also what other people can expect from you behaviorally wise. So that might look like you share personal information appropriately. You might understand personal needs and wants and know how to communicate them. You value your own opinions and you accept when others tell you no. Many of us have a mix of boundaries depending on situations. So we might have strict boundaries at work and more loose ones at home or with family or friends. There might even be different boundaries based on culture. So some cultures might find sharing personal information is never okay, while others that might be encouraged, right? So I feel there are different types of boundaries, right? Some of it could be physical space. So with our dogs, that can be personal space, or even with humans, that can be personal space, or privacy or your body. So a boundary with dog could be, okay, I don't want dogs jumping up on me or licking my mouth, right? So how you can implement those boundaries could be a variety of different ways of teaching the dog skills or managing and prevention or being aware of how you can use your own spatial pressure to get dogs to move away. There's also intellectual boundaries with people. So it can be if your ideas or how you feel is dismissed by someone else, that could be breaking a boundary, especially in relationships. If you communicate that ahead of time, I want to feel like my perspective is heard and my ideas and opinions are valued. And if they're being dismissed, I won't tolerate that and will not be in a relationship with someone who's dismissing that. That's a boundary. Emotional boundaries can be I don't feel comfortable sharing my feelings with a stranger, or someone just approaches you and asks you something very personal. You could say, I'm not comfortable sharing that. That's your boundary, and not share it. But if you felt people pleasing, you were uncomfortable, and then you shared anyways, you're breaking that emotional boundary. So, personal boundaries are knowing how to separate your feelings from someone else's. So, we all have our different perspectives and our experiences, right? Which can sometimes get blurred with somebody else's. Of maybe we'll take on because we want to please them. We want them to like us. So maybe we'll allow others to do things to us that we actually aren't comfortable with, but we want that connection. So healthy boundaries really, again, helps you identify what your values and needs are and protect that. Let's say there's like a security system in a jewelry store. And if somebody breaks in when the store's closed, you would hear that alarm going off. That physical boundary was crossed. So when we have emotional boundaries or intellectual boundaries, you have to rely on your own internal alert system, right, or alarm system to determine when those boundaries are infringed upon. So if you're talking with somebody and you're feeling really drained after, that's usually a sign that some boundary was being crossed. If we have really, really rigid boundaries, we might be blocking connection. And if we have too loose, we might be draining ourselves. So it's finding this balance of being able to connect with others and love others and give to others and protect ourselves and give to ourselves and love ourselves. And sometimes that takes practice or trial and error and just looking inward of being like, okay, how does this make me feel? So how do we set and dictate boundaries, right? It's like, oh, this is all good and dandy, but how do we actually do this? So first, we need to get clear on our why, on your values, on what's important for you. So an exercise that you can do is reflecting on personal boundaries. So maybe going as far to say, looking at like values and how you would like to be treated and what your non-negotiables are. I think that's a really good way to look at it. Like, a non-negotiable for me, for dating would be XYZ. A non-negotiable for me for how I'm treated at work is XYZ. A non-negotiable for me for how I interact with my dog is XYZ. Or non-negotiable for me with how I interact with a trainer is XYZ. So getting clear, list that out. Even if you start with like 1 to 3 boundaries in each of these kind of categories, I think would be really helpful. Of an exercise to do. And you don't want to overwhelm yourself. So if you're like, I need 20 boundaries like per category, it's like, you don't need to go crazy about it. Just start with a few and build them up slowly. And the more that you practice adhering to even one boundary, the more that becomes an easier skill to do with your other boundaries. You're actually kind of like forming a new neural pathway of, oh, I can have a boundary and stick to it. And you're basically letting the world know, if we want to go woo-woo, you're letting the universe know how to treat you. So if you are always allowing everyone to treat you however way they want, you're going to crumble. And this is the like empath's demise. You're going to get burnt out, walked over, and feel really drained, sad, and resentful. But if you can find ways to still be empathetic, still be you, and figure out what your non-negotiables are of how you deserve and expect to be treated, and you stick up to that and you go, nope, that is a non-negotiable. Maybe some boundaries you're like, these can maybe be negotiable. Okay, but I want you to figure out your non-negotiables. That can be really, really helpful. And if you're like, I don't know how to adhere these boundaries or my non-negotiables with dogs, that might be a sign then to hire a coach that you feel comfortable with to help guide you through how to do that in a way that feels good. And maybe your boundary is, I don't want a trainer using a prong collar on my dog. Then say that boundary and adhere to it. Or maybe it's, I don't want my dog, I don't know, to feel afraid around the trainer, and you see that, and if so, you want your trainer to be able to listen to you and tweak the plan. And if they're not, that's your non-negotiable. Being clear about that. And I think if you reflected that to your trainer ahead of time as well, that would also be helpful in depending on who you're working with and making sure they know what you're looking for and expecting, and if that seems aligned with how they train. And this ties into my next step, which is consider setting boundaries early on. So even with dogs, I'm like, if you set up physical boundaries, if you bring home a puppy and day one, you have your baby gates up, your pens set up where they're living space is a little bit smaller at first and then you gradually expand it, that is so much easier than if you're like, here's the whole house, and then you're getting upset when they poop and pee in a room or chew on furniture that they shouldn't. So even in a literal sense of the way, putting up those boundaries early on for dogs, very helpful. Emotionally, it's also helpful of letting people know, or if you're dating, letting the people that you are seeing know of these boundaries. Like if your boundary is, no sex before marriage, state that right away. And then the people that that's not a good fit for will fall to the side, and the people that that is a match for will be attracted to that. So thinking in terms of that way, I think is helpful. Setting boundaries and expectations from the very beginning helps everyone know where they stand and teaches them how to treat you, and try to be consistent with these boundaries. So again, if you let boundaries slide, it is going to lead to confusion. And oftentimes, if we're going to go into our behavior perspective, we are reinforcing the other individual for breaking our boundary. So that means they are going to do that more often to get whatever reinforcer it was that they got from breaking your boundary again and again and again. This could be food, if in our relationship with our dogs, it could be them getting connection and getting like physical touch, but you're feeling uncomfortable. It could be, I don't know, them getting to sniff things really fast. Like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, but your shoulder's broken off. Understanding that, again, if you're inconsistent with boundaries, you're just going to lead to kind of this gambling effect, if you will, of how another being might behave. And similar in our human relationships, same thing can happen of, okay, I say we can't do this, and then you break the boundary and you do it. Maybe they're getting reinforced with physical touch, or I don't know, money or what have you. So being aware that usually if you're letting someone else break your boundaries, they're also getting positively reinforced for doing that. So be aware. And then when your boundaries are crossed, you need to communicate that. So you need to raise your concerns, and they don't need to be confrontational, but you can say something like, hey, I really noticed that you are needing support right now, but I'm at work and I'm not able to respond to you. I will get back to you in several hours when I can. That could be implementing a healthy boundary with communication. And being able to set and adhere to boundaries is an act of self-love and self-worth. So the more that you take care of yourself, the more that you practice setting healthy boundaries and adhering to them and communicating, you are going to start to feel better because you're doing an act of self-love. You are protecting your energy. You are protecting your body. You are protecting your mind, your soul, your spirit. And then as you start practicing this, it'll also help you recognize the boundaries of others. So let's tie this into dogs, right? If we can read our dog's body language, that can also tell us their boundaries. They communicate their boundaries to each other all of the time. And I think it gets mislabeled as corrections or as like dominance displays, but oftentimes it's dogs requesting space or saying, no, you can't have that, or saying back off, or don't touch me like that. And they usually communicate those boundaries with stiffening and tensing the muscles, or showing their teeth, or snapping, or even fighting. And other times, dogs might be showing that they're afraid or are uncomfortable, and people are not respecting that boundary. And they're like, oh, but I just love to smush their faces anyways, or I need to squeeze them, or I need to pick them up. And this poor dog is not having their boundaries respected until they try to bite. That's usually the one thing that people will respect. And even on social media, though, people are still pushing those boundaries with their dogs and getting bit and then posting it on TikTok, and it's wild. So we have to remind ourselves that we have boundaries, and also animals have boundaries. If you choose to listen, you will see earlier signs of them trying to communicate those boundaries with tensing of the muscles, and also how they're interacting in space and spatial pressure. If they're moving away when you come close, if they're coming towards you, like with some curiosity, we can discover the boundaries of dogs. And if you are stuck and lost and have no idea how to do that, hiring a coach or professional certified dog trainer or behavior consultant can help you do that. So in summary, boundaries are essential for everyone, and they're an act of self-love. And we can practice ways to communicate boundaries in a healthy way that is protecting your peace, and it doesn't have to be mean or confrontational. It can just be clear while still being kind. And it doesn't have to mean it's going to upset whoever you're putting the boundary on. It might, but that's also not your responsibility. I think if we communicate boundaries ahead of time and are skilled in how we communicate, we can decrease frustrations or people being upset. But again, that's on them in their own self-work to do. We need to protect our own peace and being aware of, is anything too rigid where I'm actually just blocking out all types of connection? Or does this feel healthy where I have relationships that are feeding me, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and not just taking from me? So I'm going to share a story with you of a client that we're going to call A. Client A that notoriously really struggled with boundaries, not just with their dog, but also with their family and with me. And I want to share this with you to paint this picture because I think it will put it all together, and also share how we worked on that through our time together and the outcome. So client A called me for help with their dog's prey drive. And they had a pretty powerful dog, so they were worried that the dog could get away and hurt somebody, or if the door bursted open, that their dog, again, could be like a potential bite risk. And so I could see that the dog had a lot of general frustration and anxiety about like what to do with people. Like he had no idea. He just would sit there and cry and jump and mouth and like really just was like, I don't know how to be around people. So at first I was like, let's go into this, like normal training sessions, bring out the food. And food was really over the top exciting and almost made things worse, even when we used pretty low value food. So we had to course correct and figure out how to teach the dog to be able to take food calmly around me. And I needed some boundaries in place to feel safe, because these types of dogs tend to fixate on mouthing. And my personal boundary going into this training session was that the owners needed to be home and he needed to have a harness and leash on already, and that I wanted them to hold the harness or hold him on leash away from me until I directed them that they could drop the leash and that they could leave the room. I wanted to feel like I had some rapport with the dog and felt safe in order to do so. So that was me applying this boundary with this dog and with the owners and communicating that ahead of time. So that way we all felt safe and had the same expectations. And then I taught the dog to understand what an all done cue would mean, which means like no more treats are coming. The opportunity for reinforcement is over. Now, if I don't listen and stay true to that boundary and I treat after I say all done, what can happen is the dog doesn't know that treats are going to stop because you're continuing to treat after you say all done. So it kind of means nothing. And it can create frustration and anxiety because they don't know when they should stop offering a behavior. And they'll get frustrated if reinforcement was really heavily happening and then all of a sudden it stops and they don't know why. You can get basically like it can look like a temper tantrum, but we call it an extinction burst in the industry. And then after a couple of sessions, I realized I was getting exhausted driving over to this client's house. They lived pretty far away from me and we were going late at night. This was before I had solid times in my schedule that I liked. So I had to kind of shift and change my own boundaries because I found myself dreading going. I found myself feeling drained and exhausted and a little bit resentful, which again is one of those sneaky signs that one of your emotional or intellectual boundaries might be being crossed. So once I recognized that, I communicated that to the clients. We switched the times to be around times that felt more aligned with my energy and how I wanted my schedule to be. Fixed that, which was great, and continued to work with this dog, teaching again times that he would know when treats start, when they stop, and expectations about how he should behave around me. And when I say that, I mean that we're not going to tolerate like jumping and mouthing. And I didn't teach this in a way that was physical. I taught this in a way that had first prevention and management and a strong learning history of us reinforcing those behaviors. And I was on it of asking him an alternative behavior if I sensed that he couldn't help himself and was going to do the repetitive jumping and mouthing that can get a little dangerous. So long story short, after applying all of that, it really actually seemed to decrease the dog's overall anxiety and frustration. He didn't need as much intervention. He didn't need me telling him what to do all the time. And he was much better equipped at tolerating no treats are over or a no thank you, that we're not going to be doing that. Where in the beginning, anytime you would say that, he would almost do the behavior even larger, just really struggle with it. I think because he had a learning history of either those words or those boundaries being applied and them not meaning it, that it would cause some frustration and or he would get some clarity after having this kind of big outburst instead of the clarity before the behavior. And then we had a couple sessions where it was really challenging to coach because client A had a family. Obviously, this happens, and kids have their own needs and sometimes can interrupt training sessions, and it can be a lot for parents to juggle because if you've ever had a toddler, you understand, when they need your attention. So we needed to implement some boundaries around protecting our time together. So the actual owner could be able to learn, focus, practice, and apply the skills we're going over in session that they're paying for. And so the dog gets the clarity that they need and the practice to implement those skills. And so the kid has expectations and isn't sitting there being like, why am I ignored right now? So important to consider in any family dynamic, you have all of these different individuals with different relationships, different needs, expectations, and different boundaries. And it's important that everyone is on the same page and understands these family boundaries can be so, so helpful in reducing everyone's anxiety, stress, and frustration. And sometimes coming up with creative ways to have these boundaries in place. Like we had to switch sometimes our meeting time to be coordinated around the kids' nap times and then also around the kids' like camp schedule. So it required some flexibility from all of us, but I also understood it's really hard navigating, family systems where you have this many learners at play, right? But I thought this was a really good example. And concepts don't just apply to dogs and dog training and psychology and in human-to-human relationships. They just apply to relationships in general. And if you're living with someone, whether that's a dog or a person, having clear expectations and boundaries that everyone understands is helpful. Even if you're moving in with roommates, knowing up front what everyone's expectations and boundaries are could help reduce a lot of fights or frustrations of what are expectations around if someone starts dating somebody, if somebody wants to have people over, of how we clean we keep the place. Like everyone would save themselves a lot of trouble going through that earlier. And I wish I could go back in time and have done that in all of my, roommate relationships. I think many of us could relate to that. But a lot of us don't have that skill set, or we're so afraid of conflict that we will just people please to the point of disregarding our own needs and our own boundaries and then getting really resentful until we blow up. I'm also going to be the first to admit that I am not the best at boundaries, nor have I been historically. This is a work in progress. Like we are thinking about this, trying to apply it, improve it, and work on it in all aspects. And I'm very proud of how far I've come in it, but it's not something that's just like a one and done. Okay, yep, I decided today I'm going to have boundaries, and then now you have them. Like you need to work on this again and again and again and again. And you will sometimes break your own boundaries, like your own boundary of I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock and it's midnight and you haven't gone to bed yet. Or a boundary of I'm going to only open up social media today for an hour and you've been scrolling for 5 hours. Like we all can probably admit that we break our own boundaries too. And the more that we practice adhering to our own boundaries and then communicating and sticking to our boundaries with others, the better, and we'll feel a lot better. I can say firsthand, with my firsthand experience, this is true. So what I want all of you to do is think about, again, what your non-negotiables are. Practice this, get clear about it, practice communicating these boundaries in ways that are clear and consistent and yet still feel authentic and kind. And let me know how it goes. And if you are really struggling with this with your relationship with your dog, or if you have a family system that feels chaotic around what to do with the pets, please don't hesitate to reach out. I offer both in-person and virtual coaching and behavior consulting work. So even if you're not local to San Diego, you can still work with me. I have a handful of virtual clients. So I will link in the show notes how you can apply to work with me one-on-one directly by setting up a free discovery call. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your pup, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with me on the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. If you love this episode, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, left a review, and shared with a friend. Your support helps more people and their dogs find a little more ease and connection in their lives. Want to dive deeper? Follow me on Instagram at Co-Regulated Canines. That's CO_regulated, the letter K, the number 9, S, or head to www.coregulatedcanines.com for more resources. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your pup, and keep building those connections.